Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you very much for joining us this morning. On listening to discussions yesterday, especially coming out of the leadership of the kingdom, but also coming out of the partners, sovereign and corporate, I was struck by the enormity of the task. It suddenly made sense that the focus of the conference would be moving from words to action. But moving from words to action is easier said than done. One of the essential pieces of the puzzle is to build the capacity throughout the super region. And to do so will require a lot of things. For one, institutions, knowledge, finance, commerce, and many other things. One of the outcomes, therefore, of the ministerial roundtable was the recognition that the centerpiece of building that capacity are institutions whose primary task is to help us with the brain power to come up with the right policies through think tanks, but also institutions with the R&D capability to help us come up with geoscientific engineering technology necessary to take us to where we want to go, as well as the capacity to be able to come up with groundbreaking systems, ways of doing things that speak to the sustainable challenges of our industry. And in their wisdom, our leaders perceive that to be akin to centers of excellence, hence the discussion today. And so with me, I have professionals who are knowledgeable in that area, and each are going to give us a view of how they perceive the center of excellence. I'm going to start first with Kimmo Tiilikainen, who is the Director General of the Finnish Geological Survey. And my question to you, Kimmo, is, what are some of the priorities that you think these centers of excellence should focus on?
Thank you, Siila, and thank you. It's an honor to be here. And I would like to start of the meeting of leaders of geological surveys that was organized very soon after the ministerial roundtable. And we took the ministerial roundtable's recommendations concerning these centers of excellences and discussed on what should be done so that we can catch those recommendations and reach the targets set. And very big issue is capacity building in a wide scale, starting from human resources. So if we need to expand the mineral sector and exploration, it means that we need more professionals. So we need to increase the education of geosciences around the region. But it's not only the number of professionals, we also need to raise the skill level to use modern technologies and the methods that data sciences offers today. So that way we can deliver more information and more data usable for the investors, for example. But then it's not only human resources, also physical capabilities must be improved throughout the region. That means modern infrastructure, and we wish, of course, more finance from the governments to support this necessary development. But then this concept center of excellences, it's like a network and based on mutual cooperation and mutual capacity building, learning from each other. But the word excellence means that we are doing something better, not only that we are doing more, but we should do things better than so far. And in that sense, I would raise the issue of material efficiency. So far, mining sector has been targeting from one or couple of metals, and if it's profitable, let's take those metals. And that means that around 98% of the extracted materials is put aside or wasted. And when we are raising the skills of geosciences, we have to also focus more thoroughly what kind of deposits we have and what kind of fractions can be used for beneficial purposes to build more sustainable society so that we can improve the material efficiency. The more we can get out of the wealth out of the extracted materials, the better.
Thank you very much. Dr. Bradford, you work for the Colorado School of Mines, one of the premier institutions that produces future professionals in the mining industry. And when you think about this capacity building, when you think about overcoming the lack of efficiency in the way that we extract materials and other related things, how can we overcome those specific challenges?
Well, so I think that it's important in that context, Sheila, to recognize that there's great heterogeneity across the super region as it's defined. We go from countries that have great wealth and well-developed infrastructure to some of the poorest countries in the world. So I think it's just there's not a single answer to that question. Let's take Africa, for example. So Africa has somewhere between 30 and 35% of the critical energy minerals that we need for the energy transition. If you take that into context, it's quite clear that we're not going to be able to make the energy transition without Africa. But a lot of work needs to be done in Africa. One of the key points that came out of the ministerial roundtable the other day was that critically we need political stability and policy continuity, and those two things go hand in hand. And of course, the centers of excellence can help support this. But how do we implement that in some of the poorest countries in the world, which have, for example, let's take the cost of building a center of excellence. It may be on the order of $100 million, something like that. If your country's total revenues for a given year are on the order of $1 billion, it's not likely that it's not feasible for that country to support that center of excellence on its own. At the same time, another point that was raised in the ministerial roundtable, and something that I observed directly at an energy conference earlier this fall, countries in Africa really want to take control of their own future. And there's great opportunity with the energy transition and the resources that they have to do that. But there's a big challenge in building the infrastructure that will enable that to happen. So that's something to think about carefully. But the solution, or a solution for that issue, is multiple countries pooling resources together to build centers of excellence that can build the technical expertise, as we heard about, and can build the human resource capabilities that are required. But it will take time, take resources, but really that's the key, I think. And the key point of all of that really is that it's a heterogeneous system. Not a single solution will fit everywhere.
Thank you very much. Let me come to you, Mr. Juan Carlos Obe from Chile. You work now for a think tank in the United States, but in your prior life, you were a cabinet minister in your home country, Chile. Chile being the world's second largest producer of copper, and copper being one of the centerpieces of transition to clean energy. But more than that, your national icon, Codelco, which is a state-owned entity, is a major player. And I wanted you to give us a sense. When you think about how we move this groundswell of the super region and centers of excellence, what role do you perceive, especially for private companies, but especially those owned by nation states?
Well, I think when we talk about innovation, which is what we need here, I think mining companies have an essential role. I mean, governments need to play a role, universities and institutes and research institutions have a role too, but I think companies are essential. They have the financial resources, they have the long-term vision, they have the tolerance to trial and error, to fail, which is something that sometimes is difficult for governments. They have the data and they have the real-world operations in which innovation will have to be tested and then deployed massively if we want this to happen. So I think private mining companies are essential in deploying innovation. When you think about state-owned enterprises, I think we come back to heterogeneity. I mean, it depends, not all state-owned enterprises are created equal. So in some countries, I think state-owned enterprises are under a lot of pressure to supply money to the treasury, right? And if that is the case, and a big portion of the government's revenue comes from state-owned enterprises, in those cases, I think it's difficult to ask those companies to put money for the long run, to sometimes fail, because that takes trial and error, if they are under a lot of pressure to supply money to the treasury, right? There are some other state-owned enterprises that are very profitable, very stable, that have very strong balance sheets. Maybe those companies are in a better position to invest money in research, development, and innovation. So I think it depends on the context. I think one of the things that mining companies, I think, need to do more, and this is something which state-owned enterprises can play a role, is to work together. In my experience in Chile and in Latin America, mining companies tend to operate in isolation, not coordinating their efforts very much. And I think when we talk about innovation and technology development, operating in isolation is not very efficient, right? Not only because you can diversify the risk of trying different technologies when we work together, but also because you can, I mean, I think mining companies are facing technological challenges that are not that different from one another. So if they cooperate and get technology right, they can then deploy that massively and recoup the investment, I mean, faster.
Thank you very much. Let me come to you, Robbie Stansel, Managing Partner of Innovation Architects. I'm struck by the fact that so far we have focused on the role of public institutions and governments. And no doubt we'll not get far unless we bring in the private sector, which is where, in part, the financial resource can be found. And so I wanted you to help us. What can the governments in the super region do to ensure that there is traction? In other words, there is a positive response by the private sector? And what role do you perceive of the private sector in championing this concept of centers of excellence?
Well, I would start with looking at similar to the mining value chain, what the knowledge value chain looks like and who the players are in each of the stages. So you start with governments that should set a stable and directional stage for the whole effort. Then academia incubates the ideas. Startups and venture capital accelerate those ideas into growth. And then you go to OEMs and the mining houses to commercialize and implement those. This is, however, not a sequential process, but it's a circular process. I have a heritage in design thinking, so for me, everything is the need of the customer. The customer in this case is the mining houses, specifically the operational people in the mining houses. So you should not, in isolation, look at academia and come up with the ideas, but you should basically look at the end state, what the companies need in order to be as efficient and productive as possible, and use that as inspiration for the academic exercise, if you will. Now, the other thing to look at in this value chain is the cost of each stage goes up exponentially. So while in academia it's still pretty low cost, we're in just the prototyping piloting stage, we're already in double, triple-digit $1 million for some of the technologies. So therefore, how do you entice the private sector to get involved here? And again, back to the customer needs. If this doesn't fulfill my needs, I, as a private company, cannot afford to invest in this effort. And if you look at the balance, particularly, for example, in the kingdom, the public spending compared to the private spending is probably a factor of 2 different from other jurisdictions. So there should be a public spending that's, say, somewhere between, ideally, 4 to 8 times that of the priming the pump role of the public sector. here, I don't see that yet. And maybe it is because the companies don't necessarily see their needs fulfilled with what we are working on. So I think that is a very important aspect in there.
Thank you very much. Princess Michelle Al-Shalan, may I turn to you now? You are enterprising. You have started the Aeon Collective. And so no doubt you look to the future. But there is no future in the mineral supply chain unless we infuse fundamentally this concept of sustainability. And I wanted you to give us a sense of how you think we can embed sustainability in the mineral value chain and how the centers of excellence can help us achieve this.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question, Sheila. And I have to recognize my partner, Noura bin Turki, who helped me in co-founding Aeon Collective. But essentially, to remind ourselves of why we're existing and operating within this space. We're lucky to be the product of Saudi Arabia, meaning that within our own Bedouin heritage, we're taught to walk the talk. So a lot of these general slogans around sustainability, around taking us from point A to point B, it's no longer one of a question of what can we say that looks appealing, but it's how can we walk to deliver on that intended goal and message. So if you allow me, I'll give a bit of an iteration on the word sustainability. You know, sustainability is a word and a buzzword that we hear day in and day out, but sustain what is the key question. Sustain the status quo, I fear not, because it's really messy, especially within the mining sector and how we've been approaching the operations over there to date. My question and our approach is rather there of repairing our approaches, or what we call planetary repair. So the question therefore becomes, what are the sorts of skill sets that are needed to be integrated or embedded to a center of excellence to actually deliver on that excellence, right? In my opinion, it has to start with having a quick temperature check of where is the problem to date, right? The first is that we're way above a lot of our planetary boundaries. You know, we just came back off of COP28, where we were reminded that we need to keep 1.5 alive. Why does it matter? Well, for a lot of low-lying islands, that's essentially their lands and their territories that they'll be losing on the receiving end of. But for Saudi Arabia and for our region overall, that 1.5 tracks a lot higher. So when we're talking about that, we're already above the 2-degree political goal or target. Let's say on the scientific side as well, we're also knowing from a geopolitics perspective that the geopolitics of climate change will be changing our trajectory over the longer term period. There are a lot of inputs that we need to be embedding into the system, and we need to do it in a way that's mindful and not repeating the mistakes of the past. So not in a way that's extractionary, that's transactionary, that's forgetting some of the forgotten communities in some of these places. So the indigenous peoples, people who are attending to their own growth and their own families, the right not only to solve for energy poverty, but energy opportunity to allow some countries within the super region to rise above a certain threshold. So it's no longer a question of what are nice to haves. It's more of how can we put ourselves and put our reputations, let's say, at the merit to help propel this opportunity forward. To me, in short, it has to be some key components that we need to see within a center of excellence that will allow us to reach that intended goal and target. When we're talking a lot about policy and what is needed to churn out that innovation, that has to be something that's science-based first. So nothing that's aspirational, nothing that we're not comfortable with how we're trying to apply some of the intricacies of, but it has to be science-based and forward-looking as well to know what sort of future do we want to create for ourselves today, but also for our future generations. So innovation not only in the technologies, but equally innovation in the policy is very much needed, as well as in the financing schemes that will allow these companies to operate. You know, I look to you, Juan, brilliant strategy that just came out on hydrogen, for example, from Chile. These are the kinds of things that we need to see starting to materialize. The same for the United States with the IRA. That thinking of not leaving any state behind comes into fore in my head. The same in Europe with the Green Deal. This is a question of how do we all approach it in a way that's consistent, most importantly with our own values and who we choose to be from this point forward. The second is to make sure that when we're establishing all of this, that we're not leaving any populations behind. When I've touched on it very briefly, indigenous peoples, the youth. I recognize Abdullah Shangiti, who was a brilliant young student that came in and worked within our operations. You know, that's our superpower within the super region, is the power of our youth. They're very keen and eager. We should not be looking at their faces and say, well, good luck, solve for this. We should be helping them hand in hand to help propel a future where they'll be the engines of it, an engine of materializing at the end of the day. And the last piece that I think it would not be right without touching on is this issue of multidisciplinarity, and what does it really mean? Is it solely a focus on the science, or is it equally an inclusion of the social sciences, understanding the dynamics of what people do allow or not allow, what they're comfortable with? This question of, for example, NIMBY, not in my backyard. Why are people, for example, in Portugal or in Spain fearing mining within their places, but are totally fine or okay with it when it's happening in Africa? That has to be a mindfulness of what goes into it, and to the point that my brilliant colleague was saying, understanding the supply chains of knowledge, of technologies, that at each step of this progression, we need to be integrating the best practices, and in this case, going beyond it. Because what we know for sure is that we have not been doing a good job to date, and we need to up our game.
Thank you very much. That was very profound. And you have reminded us of the inherent complexity and multi-dimensional nature, but also you have reminded us of the intergenerational implications, both in terms of impact, but also in terms of how we deploy everybody. Mr. Salem, I have left the best for last. It is known all over the world that one of the 21st century corporate icons is Saudi Aramco. The truth of the matter is, in more ways than one, we wouldn't be here had it not been the kingdom's leadership and what the kingdom's leadership had turned Saudi Aramco into. One can't help but think, in your area of the geosciences, mineral and petrochemical characterization and resource management, what is it that the envisioned Center of Excellence can learn from the experiences of Saudi Aramco so that we set ourselves up for success from day one?
Well, after operating in the kingdom for more than 90 years, developing the hydrocarbon resources, there are many learnings and successes for the Center of Excellence to consider to accelerate the development of the mining sector in the super region. Our deeper understanding of the hydrocarbon resources was really pivotal to develop a long-term strategy to exploit and monetize this resource to provide energy to the rest of the world. There are several variables and constants within this strategy, but an important one was really the people development. Saudi Aramco has invested a lot in ensuring that we have skillful, competent workforce, and one of the most rewarding programs in the company history was really the hire to retire. We take the best students in high school and sponsor them through local and global universities. And when they come back, they continue receiving focused training to accelerate their development and their contribution. And then shortly after that, they start passing knowledge to the younger talent. So this program, among others, was really key for the company to secure the best professionals to support upstream, downstream, as well as sustainability project that we are also getting into. The second important pillar of this strategy, which can also help the Center of Excellence, was leading in technology. Last year, we celebrated the granting of more than 1,000 patents as the largest number in our company history, but also for any energy company. And behind this wheel of innovation, really a computational grid that we keep expanding through heterogeneous capabilities. We just added 2 supercomputers to ensure that we can see the subsurface, the highest resolution, identify resources, as well as another supercomputer for simulating the reservoir response, aiming to develop the field in the most effective way. On surface, we continue using the latest data analytics, monitoring system, and remote operations. And the aftermath of all this investment has really been very rewarding. We could see fields or reservoirs for the first time after using advanced technologies and imaging on the supercomputer, as well as optimally develop our fields. And more importantly, being able to expand our capabilities into looking for carbon sequestration sinks, which are also very important for blue hydrogen and ensuring that we produce oil and gas with the lowest emissions and provide a source of energy to other industries, including the mining, of course, to produce minerals in a much greener fashion. I think these are 2 capabilities that were very successful for us, and we think they will be, of course, certainly adding value to build on the center of excellence and in the super region.
Thank you very much. So, as fate would have it, we've run out of time. So, what I'm going to do is give each one of you 30 seconds, and if you exceed 30 seconds, that means nobody else will talk. So, I'll start with you. Whatever you want to give us as a parting shot, let's go through the line, and we'll take it from there. Kimo?
So thank you. So very briefly, once we have to deliver more in the mineral sector, but we also have to deliver better in the sense of responsibility and sustainability. And that starts from education.
Thank you.
I would say you set out a bold vision to disrupt, so do not benchmark others, but lead the way and disrupt both in technology. You're the kingdom of energy. You should break with plasma, not with dynamite. You should not create tailings because you eliminate the plants, those kinds of things, but also on the cultural aspect. Saudi Arabia is built on a culture of trust. The Western model is around KPIs and so on, which is an expression of distrust in your people. So build a completely different way of doing this and hire not for experience, but for attitude. Attitude to be open, to change things, to build things.
Seth, 30 seconds.
Well, I think the mining sector in Saudi Arabia has an opportunity to produce minerals in a greener fashion, capitalizing on utilizing the most prolific carbon sequestration sinks, which great opportunity to use either natural gas, which can reduce reductions by almost 50% than coal, or use blue hydrogen, among other types of sources. So we can produce energy transition commodities in a green way.
Thank you. Juan?
Coming from a mining country, my suggestion would be very careful and put a lot of effort into building a good reputation for the mining industry. Make sure that people get a fair share of the value that is being created, take care of the environment. If people get the perception that this is an industry that will hurt the environment, hurt communities, the work you will need to do to scale up the industry will be much, much harder. So take care of its reputation from the very, very beginning.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the idea of making sure that the communities where the resources are located and extracted derive the most benefit from this coming boom that we have. And key to that is making sure that the centers of excellence help support capacity growth in not only extracting the materials, but also refining and processing and manufacturing. That's really the key to building robust economies and diverse, secure supply chains of critical minerals.
Thank you. Princess Michelle?
I would say that, honestly, in short, we have no excuse in Saudi Arabia not to excel beyond where everyone else has left off. We have huge visionary leaders with the king and the crown prince that have set the pathway forward. We have huge umbrellas with which we're aimed to achieve those goals and targets, whether it's the Saudi Green Initiative or the Middle East Green Initiative, that give us a broader umbrella with which we can achieve all of these goals and targets. And at the end of the day, what we need to do and become, essentially, is a beacon of hope for everyone else around the world to see that it could be done, and at the merit and at the standard with which it could be done, so that we can crowd people in. Because to your point, Sheila, that you made earlier, we cannot go through this on our own. We need to show great examples. No one center of excellence can get the job done. We need to do something in a way that allows others to replicate and amplify what we can do in this region.
Thank you very much. So, in a nutshell, a tall order. But there is something of an elephant in the room. And so let me go there. That elephant in the room is geopolitics. It's no secret that we sit at the edge of a complete change in the structure of global power. There is no doubt about that. In many ways, the centers of excellence will be the pathway to that geopolitical shift, both in the domain of diplomacy, in the domain of commerce, but also in the domain of change. In my humble opinion, the single most important thing the super region can do is assume this position of leadership and do for the world what past generations attempted, succeeded on one level, but not on all levels. I think we should not be shy about saying we, the super region, will be the region that promises our generations a better future, thanks to transition. We should not be shy about this, but we should also not be delusional. It's a tall order. It requires hands on deck. I am proud to have been part of the process of thinking about how this shift can happen. But I'm also very clear there is no need to apologize for saying here and now, we, the super region, we will take the lead and we will contribute to making the world a better place. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests. We appreciate your audience. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.